On Tuesday, Texas Governor Greg Abbott addressed the Greater Houston Builders Association. During his remarks, Abbott connected fentanyl to border security. He said, quote, "It is beyond belief that the federal government will not step up and do more to both secure our border, to go after cartels, and do everything they can to get fentanyl off our streets." Border security has been a hot-button issue as midterms approach, and Republican governors, including Abbott, have sent a large number of undocumented immigrants to Democrat-run cities. The incumbent, who is vying for a third term, is running against former Congressman Beto O'Rourke in the Lone Star State's governor's race. Polling shows Abbott has maintained a consistent lead over the Democrat.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Jennifer, for the very kind introduction. Very thoughtful for you. Also, thank you for the leadership that you provide to this tremendous organization. And Amy, also thank you for your leadership and everything that you've done for GHBA. And I want Jennifer, you were talking about fentanyl, and I want to both thank and recognize somebody with us here today. And that is your sheriff, Sheriff Henderson. I was with him about a month ago here in Montgomery County when we were dealing with the opioid epidemic and with a keen focus on what is going on with fentanyl. Fentanyl is the leading cause of death in the United States for people between the ages of 18 and 45. And it's just shocking what's happening, but even more shocking than that is the way that the drug cartels lace fentanyl onto multicolored candy. It's called rainbow candy. And as we're here moving closer and closer to the time of Halloween trick-or-treating, I'm extraordinarily concerned about the dangers that children could be facing where they could have dropped into whatever container they're carrying around with them, something that could be laced with fentanyl. It is beyond belief that the federal government will not step up and do more to both secure a border, to go after the cartels, and do everything they can to get fentanyl off our streets. But as Jennifer was talking about, Texas law enforcement is stepping up to try to do our part by seizing, just over the past year, enough fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child in the United States of America. But I want to thank Sheriff Henderson and his team for partnering with us to make sure that we address the scourge. Also want to thank Steve Toth as well as Charles Cunningham for being here with us today as we get ready for another session where a lot will be done. And part of what I will talk about will be some of that. I'll talk about some things that we have done and some things that we will do. But first, let me just take a moment to say how proud I am to be with the world's leading home builders from the greater Houston area. Thank you for what you're doing. You all know as well as anybody that owning a home is a pivotal part of the American dream. And I want to thank you for the role that you play to help fulfill that American dream. We know that everything is possible in the state of Texas, including the possibility of someone being able to own their own home. And I want to thank you for what you do. What you all are doing is actually contributing to what truly is recognized as the Texas economic juggernaut. For almost 20 years in a row, Texas has been ranked as the #1 state in America as the best state for doing business. Texas has received the Governor's Cup. Texas has received the Governor's Cup, which is a national championship award that goes to the state as the #1 ranking state for economic development. And we have done that every single year that I have been your governor of the great state of Texas. We also lead the United States of America for exports for 18 years in a row. And Texas, on a quarterly basis, the gross domestic product results come out for all the states in the United States of America. The most recent one came out last week, showing once again Texas ranked #1 amongst all the states in the United States for leading in gross domestic product. Interestingly, Most of the states in the United States for the past quarter had a negative gross domestic product growth. So it was not a growth, it was a decline. But there were a handful of states that had a positive GDP growth, Texas being one of them. When you look at the GDP, interestingly now, Texas has an annual GDP of more than $2 trillion that shows how incredibly large our country is, our country, our Freudian slip, I have no doubt, but how incredibly strong our state is. And this past May, for the first time ever, Texas became home to more Fortune 500 company headquarters than any other state in the United States of America. And so some of these things I just told you about are things that involve large businesses. But we know this, and that is most of the businesses, actually more than 90% of all businesses in the state, are small businesses. So I'm proud to tell you that Texas also ranks #1 as the #1 state in America to start a small business. So what does all this stuff add up to? What does this mean? What are the consequences of all this? Let me list several for you. One thing that it means is that since you all last reelected me, Texas has added far more new jobs than any other state in the United States of America. Also, as we gather here today, more Texans are earning a paycheck than ever before in the history of our state. But there's another result of all of the economic development that we have that you all are a part of. Because of our robust economy, Texas has achieved extraordinary revenue to our state. And we are, as we gather today, sitting on a budget surplus of $27 billion that we must spend over the next 2 years. And so what are we going to do with that $27 billion? Well, part of it will be used to address essential needs such as health care and education and school safety and things like that. But when you think about it, whose money is that? Exactly, it's your money. And so what I suggest we do with at least half of that $27 billion is return it to you, the taxpayers, with the largest property tax cut in the history of our state. Along those lines, importantly, it's important to recognize there's only one candidate running for governor who's actually raised property taxes, voted to raise them 3 times, and that's my opponent. We will not allow your property taxes to go up. We're going to find ways to lower your property taxes to make it more affordable to live in the greatest state in the country. Now, I know when it comes to building a home, there's other things that are needed other than just the plot of land and the supplies that you need to build it and the people you need to build it. One of the things that you need is somebody cannot actually have a home unless they're going to be able to drive on a roadway that gets them to that house. I realize there are some ranch houses that may not have roadways, but for the most part, you're going to need a build-out of infrastructure. And the good news is this. Also, because of the robust Texas economy, we have a record-setting amount of money that was dedicated last month for roadways and infrastructure of $85 billion to build roads and infrastructure in the state of Texas, making it better for the home builders who are trying to add to that infrastructure. Now, importantly, part of this money is constitutionally dedicated to building roads and infrastructure. Part of it is constitutionally dedicated from the sales tax revenue. Part of it also is because Texas this past year had more income derived from our oil and gas severance tax than ever before in the history of our state. And it is important that we have a governor who supports the oil and gas industry in the state of Texas as opposed to the radical leftist Green New Deal that would destroy that oil and gas production. Now, know something else when it comes to building a home. Candidly, when it comes to any type of business project whatsoever, and that is there's a need for speed. There's, regardless of what type of crunch we're in with regard to inadequate housing, there's a need for speed whenever you build a home because time is money. But that need for speed exists more prolifically now perhaps than ever before because of the mismatch between the demand for homes and the supply for homes. And the need for speed is something that we, for the Texas leadership, that we get and we comprehend. I can give you maybe the most profound story of all, and that is, if you recall, COVID struck in late February or early March of 2020. And it was a month after that, in April of 2020, when Elon Musk first called me and talked to me about the prospect of building a gigafactory in the state of Texas. And for a few months, we talked about that, negotiated that, up until June of 2020, when he made the decision that, yes, he would go ahead and build that gigafactory. So from the time period of June of 2020, when they first began turning dirt on the project, to the time when they literally built out from top to bottom more than a mile-long gigafactory and having vehicles literally roll off of that. It took 18 months, and Elon himself posted a tweet saying that in 18 months he was able to build a gigafactory from ground up. He said in 18 months, if he were still in California, he would not yet have his first permit. We move at the speed of business in the state of Texas. Now, again, I know that the same principle applies as it concerns building. I also know for a fact that in some cities and some counties, it seems like they move at a snail's pace with regard to the permitting process. Sometimes it may be because they're overburdened. Sometimes, candidly, it may be purposeful. But because of that, and because of our, meaning the collective body of the legislature, knew of the importance of accelerating the permitting process, they passed a law that I signed that requires city and counties to act on site development plans within 30 calendar days and made subsequent applications subject to a 15-day period review, or those plans would be automatically approved. We are working to accelerate the pipeline to make sure you get your permits approved and you are able to move quicker in building the homes that our consumers need here in the Lone Star State. I also know that there's a work shortage. And I mean, candidly, if you talk to any employer in the state of Texas, there is a work shortage. But the work shortage, I think, for home building probably predated the COVID days, and it continues as we talk today. And that's why we both created and funded and added more funding to the career and technical education programs. And these programs are life-changing for the businesses that need them, so that they're going to be able to build the homes or whatever product they're providing faster. But just as important, maybe if not more important, they're life-changing for the people who go through these job training programs. I visited a site over in Baytown, Texas, about one of these job training programs at S&B Constructors and Engineers. And when I visited that site, I met a woman who had gone through that site and worked her way up, and I visited with her, and she explained her story to me. She said a few years before I met her, she was homeless, but after having gone through this job training program and working her way up the ladder, she went from being homeless to being a homeowner. And I asked her how much she was making, and she told me. And so I said, so a few years ago, you were homeless, but now that you've done this program, now that you're working here, you are now making more money than the governor of the state of Texas. It shows how transformative these programs are. So we have all those things. Let me just add one more thing that's incredibly important. I know that when people want to buy a home, they're looking in part for maybe the school district they're in, They're looking in part how close they may be to shopping malls or grocery stores or gas stations. But I know something else they're looking for. They're looking for a safe community where they know that their family is going to be safe. And along those lines, I will first tell you this, and that is, when we go back to what I was talking about at the beginning, about how all these businesses are moving here to Texas more than any other business, or I'm sorry, more than any other state. And they're growing their businesses more in the state of Texas than in any other state. For my first few years as governor, I would always ask these CEOs why it is that you're coming to the state of Texas. And the answer was pretty much always the same. Well, you have no income tax, your regulations are more reasonable, and then they would begin to add in, you have the best workforce in the United States. Over the past year, there's been another reason why they added that they are leaving Illinois or California or New York or wherever state they're coming from and coming to the state of Texas. And that is, they said that it is no longer safe for them and their families to either do business or to even live in the state that they're coming from. Public safety is of paramount importance. In addition to protecting the lives of people, it's also important to just create an environment that's safe for a business and for individuals to live. And so one thing that we are working to achieve both in this election as well as in the legislature, and that's to ensure that communities in the state of Texas will be more safe. That said, we have faced challenges in achieving this goal because of decisions that are being made at the local level. I'll give you one example. One is that you've seen in communities like in Portland and Seattle, and LA and San Francisco, and Chicago and New York, you see the chaos on these news shows at night about the smash and grab operations, about the way that people are endangered just by actions by criminals on the streets. And part of that bubbled up from this movement to defund police. Well, even in Texas, we saw that ideology come to reality. Because in Texas, there's always one city that tries to replicate these California cities. And you know what I'm talking about. It's Austin, Texas. So Austin, Texas defunded their police by more than $100 million. And it was a deadly decision because last year, Austin set an all-time record for the most number of people who were murdered because they had fewer law enforcement officers on the streets. Well, working with Representative Toth and others in the state legislature, we said not on our watch will we allow our law enforcement to be defunded, because in Texas, we support our law enforcement officers, period. And I signed a law that will defund any city that defunds their police to keep our communities safe. So we fixed that, but candidly, there's something going on that you all surely are tuned into. In Harris County, Texas, most prolifically, that's just as, if not more dangerous than defunding the police. And it's the approach taken by the Democrat Socialists. That's not my branding. They ran as Democrat Socialists for judicial positions in Harris County, Texas. And they have this attitude, which again mimics what's going on in LA and San Francisco, et cetera, where extraordinarily dangerous criminals who are arrested are released on easy bail and back out on the streets. I was in Houston, Texas a couple of weeks ago in the aftermath of a deputy constable who was murdered. That would be horrific unto itself. What makes it even worse is the fact that the person who murdered this deputy constable had last year murdered somebody else and was let back out on the streets when he then murdered that deputy constable. The fact of the matter is that for over each of the past 2 years, there have been at least 200 people killed by someone who was let out on bail. There's been 300 people, over the past 3 years, there have been 300 women at least who have been sexually assaulted by someone who was let out on bail. The bail policies of Harris County are extraordinarily dangerous and must be stopped. And when I am reelected as your governor, we will put a stop to the revolving door bail policies in Harris County or other places in the state of Texas. So Texas is by far the best when it comes to economic development. We're amongst the top, if not the best, when it comes to education. On education, we provided, for me as governor, I provided more funding for our public schools than any governor in the history of Texas, more funding for pay raises for teachers than any governor in the history of Texas, and there is more funding per pupil for our schools than ever before. And Texas has one of the highest high school graduation rates in America. And earlier this year, we were recognized as having more blue ribbon schools than any other state in the United States. So from economic development to education to insisting on public safety to so many other things, Texas is leading the way. And we're leading the way in part because we have people like you all who are deeply involved and interested in what's going on in your community. And that's exactly what GHBA does. You get involved, and your involvement leads to results to make sure that we had good government. So I want to thank GHBA and the leadership here once again for all you do to quite literally build a better Texas. Thank you all. God bless you all, and God bless the great state of Texas. Thank you all.